I love DreamWorks. They're a studio that has played a massive role in my younger childhood, and as of today, they have released 51 feature films, with their most recent release being the 2024 film, The Wild Robot, which I was lucky enough to see early. Back when the trailer for this one released, I knew that I had to get ready. Therefore, in preparation, my stupid self decided that I should watch everything DreamWorks has ever made, both as a way to unlock some childhood nostalgia, and as a way to catch up on anything I may miss from them. That is 51 films, may I remind you. That is an absurd number of movies, and now having watched, well, that, my stupid self also decided that I'll be ranking them from worst to best in a variety of tiers for a little video of mine. I don't know, this is just what I do when I'm bored. Anyway, that's enough of an intro. Let's kick off this video with my least favourite movie that they've made. Megamind vs. the Doomed Syndicate, the new Megamind movie. Okay, that didn't sound as dramatic as I'd hoped. Let's add the Inception sound. Megamind vs. the Doomed Syndicate. Yeah, it's the worst DreamWorks movie. I personally love the first Megamind film. I have a lot of childhood connections to it. I quote it all the time. I think it's a very funny film that tells a very unique story. It even has my favourite DreamWorks villain in it. The sequel, however, is a big disappointment. 14 years later, and the animation looks so much worse. I know that this film was produced by DreamWorks' television pipeline, DreamWorks Animation Television, basically meaning that this wasn't made by the same people who make the other DreamWorks movies, which is why the animation looks so much worse. But honestly, I just don't think that's a valid excuse. Trollhunters Rise of the Titans is the only other DreamWorks film that was made by their television pipeline, yet I think it's one of the best photorealistic DreamWorks films to date. I just don't see why DreamWorks gave this film such a low budget when we could have gotten a movie that looks just as good as this. This isn't a criticism of the animation team, by the way. This is more so a criticism of the gritty executives. Even the director himself stated how limited the production resources were when making this. Still, the visuals are not the worst part of this. The plot is filled with plot holes, the character assassination is just saddening, the new villains just don't fit into the story, and they changed Minion's name to Chum? What? Why? Also, none of the original voice actors returned. No Will Ferrell, no David Cross, you name it. The only compliment I can really give this one is that I found some of the new voices to be kind of funny.
And I can't open my tummy medicine!
But yeah, overall, my least favorite DreamWorks movie. If you like the first Megamind like I do, I would highly suggest skipping this.
You have failed me for the last time.
Kicking off the E tier, I have Trolls. Trolls is weird. I think it's evident that the entire Trolls franchise is aimed towards a younger kid demographic, in comparison to other DreamWorks movies which are at least aiming towards slightly older kids. And you know what? That's okay. I can watch and appreciate younger kids media, if they have good writing. But Trolls? I just can't get behind, I'm sorry. I'm kind of surprised that these movies have quite a large and active fandom. I think they're visually great. I absolutely love the art style. You can see that the design is really cared here, and I like some of the music. Yeah, I actually find myself to enjoy some of the pop covers. But outside of that, I've clearly grown out of this. The entire movie is just sort of goofing around in this Bergen place with characters I just don't care about, with twists that leave very little impact. It's good for your kids, but not something I can imagine the whole family loving. At number 49, I have the sequel to the first Trolls movie, Trolls World Tour. What I said with the first Trolls movie also applies here. I like the visuals, I like some of the pop covers and the original music, but otherwise, it's not for me. I only ranked this one higher because I think the story in this one has a little more creativity, and they overall just take better advantage of the fantasy elements in my opinion. Still, I don't like it. Bub as the villain is not a great improvement over the chef from the first movie too. I think the contrast between her and Poppy is extremely surface level and could have been built up a lot more. Look, it's for younger kids. I would just recommend that you watch any other DreamWorks franchise over this. Next movie. Okay, this might surprise a few of you, but at number 48, I have the Penguins of Madagascar film. I remember enjoying this one quite a lot when I was younger, but rewatching it now, yeah, I didn't like it. I liked the Penguins a lot more in the Madagascar films. The plot and character arcs in this one just felt really basic, and I just didn't really feel too strongly about much here. I did laugh a few times, I enjoyed Dave, and that Norm of the North jump scare. But otherwise, yeah, I didn't like this. I feel like that this would make for a pretty decent Illumination movie. I'm not saying that this feels like an Illumination film, it just has a lot of elements similar to films like Minions. Overall, it's not as good as I remembered. Next movie. At number 47, I have Spirit Untamed, which is to this day the lowest grossing animated DreamWorks movie, with it only grossing $44 million in the cinemas. Okay, so I did some research before writing the script, and apparently this movie isn't a sequel to Spirit, Stallion and the Cimmaron, which I thought it was. Instead, it's a movie based off a Netflix show? Yeah, this explains a lot. I haven't seen the Netflix show, but my thoughts on the film is that it's fine. I think if you're a fan of the show, you'll probably find some value in this. I at least thought that the visuals were solid. It is evident that this was produced on a lower budget, but I think the art direction is good enough for it to be, not Megamind 2. However, the story is really weak. I thought that the first half of the movie was cute. Not that good, but at the very least it was comforting and entertaining. But when the adventure actually starts, it's really underwhelming. Though I did like the interactions between Lucky and Spirit. It reminded me of Hiccup and Toothless. Honestly, there are a lot of similar messages and themes from How to Train Your Dragon in this. I also don't think that this movie really tried with the family stuff. Jake Gyllenhaal, who is one of my favourite actors, voices the dad in this, but the conflict between his daughter just felt extremely sidelined. Instead, the film opts to focus on the adventure, which I just found to be really boring. Overall, it's fine, but I wouldn't rewatch it. At number 46, I have the third Trolls movie, Trolls Band Together. Yeah, I actually didn't mind this one. It's still quite low tier for DreamWorks, but I didn't have a terrible time. I'll start with my positives. I enjoyed the villains. I believe their names were Velvet and Veneer. I liked how simple their motives were. Like I said with the other Trolls films, I really like the animation. I think it's really pleasing to look at, and honestly, I think this movie has the best pop covers in the franchise. The music in that climax was honestly incredible. Still, at the end of the day, it's a Trolls film. I don't care for the character relationships. This one in particular has the most plot holes, and a lot of the new characters are really grating. Viva was actually unbearable. Overall, it's the best Trolls film though. It's still not my thing, and I'll probably never willingly watch it again, but I didn't mind watching it. Like I said before, you'll get more value out of watching any other DreamWorks franchise. At number 45, I have The Boss Baby 2 Family Business. Okay, on rewatch, this film is not nearly as bad as I made it out to be in my other video. I severely apologize to the Boss Baby fandom. There's a lot of sweet moments here, most particularly with Tim and his daughter. The animation isn't the best from DreamWorks, but it's still nice and pleasing to look at. I somehow like the humor, and there's a nice musical number towards the end. I still find it crazy knowing that Hans Zimmer composed for these movies. Like, how do you go from making music for movies like Gladiator, Inception, Interstellar, Dune, and then also compose for this? Look, I love Hans Zimmer, but what is Toodaloo Toilet Head? Anyway, my biggest issue with this movie is definitely the villain. He's very... what is this? Also, I feel like these movies are way too comedy focused. In my opinion, the messages just don't work too well with how ridiculous these movies can get. I do still laugh a lot when watching this, but the messages just feel very sidelined in comparison to the jokes. Overall, I guess it's an alright movie though. If you're gonna watch just for the comedy, then you'll have a good time, but if you're going in for the messages, you won't feel too touched. Anyway, next up at number 44, I have the first Boss Baby movie. I think this one is a little better than its sequel since I actually really enjoyed the villain. I actually like how his motives are written into the plot. I enjoyed the focus on imagination, but just like the second movie, the story is just too comedy focused. I actually think that these are really funny movies, but I don't come out of these movies feeling very touched by their messages. The Boss Baby isn't too bad though. It's perfectly enjoyable for families. I just personally wasn't touched by the messages since I found it to be too silly. But hey, if you thought Marvel had the best transitions, check this one out.
Something my parents said got me thinking. Where do babies come from?
Enjoyable, but very chaotic, so take that as you will. At number 43, I have the Road to El Dorado. Sorry for the hot take here, guys. I know this film has quite a big fandom. I've seen the memes. I'd never seen El Dorado before starting this DreamWorks marathon of mine, so I was hoping to love it. It's original, it's a high fantasy animated movie. I was really hoping to enjoy this one, but yeah, I agree with the critics here. Miguel and Tulio's conflict that they have with each other in this movie did not feel genuine to me at all. I didn't find them too likable either. I just felt bad for the people living in El Dorado since they were all being manipulated by two idiots. I wouldn't say that I dislike this movie though, I just don't think I'll have a desire to rewatch it again. I at least did find the humor to be really enjoyable. At least for older people, if you know what I mean. I also thought that the music in 2D animation was really good, and I honestly really miss 2D animation. Still, all of that was not enough to kick this movie into the high tiers for me. Overall, El Dorado was fine in my eyes, but I probably won't have a desire to rewatch it again. At number 42, I have Shark Tale. Realistically, this movie is probably like bottom 5 DreamWorks, but it's a bit of a guilty pleasure for me. I mean, just look at this cast. Jack Black voices a gay shark, film director Martin Scorsese voices a pufferfish, Robert De Niro voices the villain, and Will Smith voices a really, really unlikable fish. What happened behind the scenes to get this cast together? Unfortunately, the cast is just too good for the movie in my opinion. The plot is horrendously stupid, the animation hasn't aged too well, and Oscar might actually be the worst DreamWorks character. Still, I kind of found this movie to be pretty funny, though I can definitely see why this was critically the lowest rated DreamWorks movie before Megamind 2 released. This movie's writing is not great. Overall, Shark Tale is a guilty pleasure. It's not great, but it's enjoyable. If you know what you're getting into and watching it, you won't have a bad time, so take that as you will. Kicking off the C tier, and at number 41, I have Shrek the Third. This is easily the weakest Shrek movie in my opinion. Shrek 1 and 2 are and will forever be classics in my eyes, and Shrek Forever After is extremely underrated. This one though is just fine in my opinion. I liked the plotline with Shrek and Arthur, but I didn't find many of the other plotlines to be that engaging. The climax too was extremely underwhelming, especially in comparison to the heights that the Shrek 2 climax was. Shrek 3 isn't too bad though, it's still Shrek. I definitely still laughed a couple times, the messages are still here, and they're sweet. I still believe that the heart is here. I don't have too much to say about this one. It's my least favourite Shrek movie, but that's really it. It's not too bad, it's not too good, just an average 6 out of 10 for me. At number 40, I have the Mr. Peabody and Sherman movie. This one was a first time watch for me, so I don't have a childhood connection to it, but I thought it was decent. I mean, personally, I thought this movie was pretty funny.
Nobody move! Sherman, I've got to get you out of here before you touch yourself!
I thought it was cute. In my eyes though, I do think that this was a little overly silly like the Boss Baby, except a little better. I liked Peabody's character, some of the sweet moments, and generally the focus on time travel. I love time travel movies. Interstellar, Back to the Future, Donnie Darko, time travel fiction is usually a blast for me. However, Mr. Peabody and Sherman is definitely on the weaker side of time travel movies that I've seen. Yeah, I'm aware it's a kids movie, but I noticed quite a few plot holes here. What I really didn't like about this one though were Penny and Sherman's characters. Sorry, but I found Penny to be extremely annoying, and Sherman, while sweet, I also did find to be quite unbearable at times. If he had just stopped yelling Mr. Peabody's name every 2 minutes, I probably would have liked this a lot more. But as is, I just found it to be cute. Not really a memorable DreamWorks movie in my eyes. I know many people grew up with this one. Good for you, I didn't. To me, How to Train Your Dragon is still the best father-son story from DreamWorks. Next up, I have B-Movie, which is an animated rom-com written by Jerry Seinfeld. I am confused on how this movie was allowed, but at least Jerry Seinfeld apologized. I feel like if you're going into the B-movie wanting to laugh, you'll certainly get that, but if you're going in wanting to hear the message about the value of bees in our world, you'll kind of get that, though you'll probably question your sanity, so take this being written by Jerry Seinfeld as you will. It's a good family film though, kids will learn about the value of bees and adults will laugh at the sexual undertones. Oh wait, you thought I was talking about Vanessa? Nah man, I'm talking about Ken. Anyway, my friend Pi would like to take over this segment of the video for a little message.
So, Ken from the B movie. He's like a basic high school jock mixed with a dad working 6 to 5 and hosting barbecues for his neighbors once a month. I find it funny how his eyes are always either squinting or open wider than Buzz's eyes in Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. And oh, why the long face, pal? I mean, bro's nose bridge is the length of the Great Wall of China. Hell, he can probably smell China with that thing. Also, check out that jaw and those brows. Bro is constantly trying to riz me up, and I don't like it. Speaking of which, is it, getting warm in here?
At number 38, I have Orion in the Dark, the new Charlie Kaufman film. I want to start this review segment by saying that I'm not too big on Kaufman's work. The only films that I've seen from him are The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which I thought was good, Adaptation, which I actually kind of loved, and this movie, which I made a review on that you can check out. But if you don't want to, I'll summarize my thoughts here. I like it. Charlie Kaufman certainly has a very unique style of writing that you can definitely feel here, with how Orion speaks to himself and the audience during the introduction. I do want to point out that this is another DreamWorks film that clearly didn't have a huge animation budget, but still, there's some really unique art direction here. I love the drawing aesthetic, though I'm not too big on the human designs. The story is quite ambitious too, and while I do appreciate that, I feel as if the film just got too overly convoluted by the third act, and it results in a very unusual ending. Dark dies but gets revived thanks to the power of Inception, and time travel? Like, I don't know man, I like the first 2 acts, but the third act was just messy. I'll get up to more of Kaufman's work in the future, but as of now, this is my least favourite of his works. My guess is that Kaufman had bigger ambitions for this film, but the studio execs watered it down. It's still decent I guess, but it's not as good as The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind or Adaptation in my opinion. At number 37, I have Turbo. It's okay. Not too much to say about this one. I enjoyed it, the racing scenes were cool. It's not as thrilling as a Fast and Furious movie, a very misleading poster by the way. But I enjoyed the racing. I laughed a couple times, most particularly with the interactions with Turbo and the other snails. I don't know how they got Snoop Dogg, Samuel L. Jackson, and Ryan Reynolds to voice snails, but I'm all here for it. The messages were certainly done better in Ratatouille in my eyes, but if you're a big fan of racing, you'll probably find some value in this. I wouldn't call this bottom tier DreamWorks like I've seen a fair few people on YouTube say, but I certainly didn't feel anything strongly towards it. It's cute I guess, Families will like it. Next film. At number 36, I have the first Spirit movie, Spirit, Stallion, and the Cimmaron. I know there are many people online who call this one of DreamWorks' best. I'm not one of them, but I still like this one. To me though, the hand-drawn animation, visual storytelling, and score certainly carries this one. But I wasn't really feeling the rest of the film. The plot itself got really repetitive for my liking. Spirit escapes, gets captured, and the movie repeats. That's really it. There aren't too many interesting characters too. I do appreciate how emotional this one can get, but I just wasn't really feeling the entire film. Unlike a lot of people online, I actually didn't mind the pop songs, but the Matt Damon narration, I must say, was pretty funny, and did distract me a little bit.
The story that I want to tell you cannot be found in a book. They say the history of the West was written from the saddle of a horse.
Overall, I did like Spirit, though it's just not a favorite of mine. If you're interested, check it out. Next movie. Next up, I got the first Madagascar film. Now, although younger me grew up with this one, I always preferred the sequel. And on rewatch, Madagascar 2 held up pretty well. This one though, sadly not as much. Though it was still a very nostalgic film to revisit, the comedy, soundtrack, and cast of iconic characters were as great as ever, and I actually really liked the subplot the penguins get in this one. And if I had one big note on rewatch, it's that King Julian is definitely not straight. Personally though, I just wasn't invested in the stories I used to be when I was younger. I still really enjoyed Alex and Marty's conflict, and I loved the entire climax. That was probably the strongest part of the film. However, the middle of the movie was just sort of comedy on the island, and that's really it. I enjoyed it, but not too much was happening. Overall, I prefer the sequels, and I'll talk about them soon. I still enjoyed this, but it's sadly not a favourite like it used to be. I would still recommend giving it a rewatch if you grew up with it though. Next film. At number 34, I got the new Kung Fu Panda movie. Yep, I saw Kung Fu Panda 4 alright. How was it? Yeah, it was quite average. It's not bad, but it's certainly the weakest of the 4 movies. I want to start this review segment by saying that I never really got behind the hate that all the new DreamWorks movies got after Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Excluding The Wild Robot, which I'll talk about later, I do admit that nothing DreamWorks has made recently has been nearly as good as what they made in 2022, but I wouldn't exactly say that they've fallen off. I'll say it, I enjoyed Ruby, probably more than most online. I'll talk about that one soon, but admittingly, the film does have its fair share of hiccups. This unfortunately applies to Kung Fu Panda 4 as well. Starting with my positives, the animation was good. I know that there were people that were hoping for a massive leap in art direction like in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I was sort of too, but regardless, I thought the animation here was pretty good. Though I don't think the final fight against the Chameleon topped the final fight in Kung Fu Panda 3 visually. Speaking of which, the Chameleon. I think this might be a hot take, but I actually thought that she was a decent villain. I like the contrast they put between her and Poe, but I can certainly admit that her motives could have been better put together, but her scenes were intimidating enough to make her one of the stronger parts of the film for me. She's not nearly as good as Tai Lung or Shen though. I loved the Jack Black music cover, I thought that Poe was still a great character, and his dads were all great too. The comedy was certainly still here. But now onto my negatives. They mostly came down to Zhen's character. I really don't like her. I don't hate Awkwafina's voice, I just hate the character of Zhen. She was absolutely unbearable. I did not feel anything for her. I hate how much time is spent with her. I hate her twist. I hate how she's going to be the next Dragon Warrior. She's annoying. I just don't really like her. I'm sorry. Also, I didn't like how they wrote Tai Lung and the fact that the Furious 5 were only in here for last minute cameos. Kung Fu Panda 4 was decent, I guess, but I would have liked this so much more if Zhen was just a better character. Anyway, next movie. At number 33, I have the Captain Underpants movie. I like it, I just don't love it. Though as someone who has read the books before, I think this movie perfectly captures the look and feel that the comics had. The animation and art style is certainly my favourite part of this. It's expressive, it's vibrant. The production team did a brilliant job here. I was never a massive fan of the books myself. I did read them quite a bit in my school library when I was younger, but I wasn't too big on them, so I didn't feel too much nostalgia for the books after rewatching this. Though I did rewatch this with my friend who was a much bigger fan of the book series, and he loves this movie. So with that in mind, if you're a massive fan of the books, you should certainly go watch this. I just felt like it grew out of a lot of the humour this film had to offer from the books. My only humorous note for this one is that the toilets at the end of the film reminded me of a certain upcoming Michael Bay movie. But overall, I still found this to be enjoyable. If you like the books, I would highly recommend this. I am also interested to see how DreamWorks will tackle the Dogman movie next year. That will be interesting. Anyway, next movie. Next up, I have Joseph King of Dreams, which I believe is the most forgotten DreamWorks movie. I have heard nobody ever talk about this. In fact, it's the only DreamWorks movie that doesn't even have a tomato score. Is it for a good reason? No, actually. I honestly think that this should be talked about more. Considering how this is a direct-to-DVD film, it makes sense why nobody really speaks of it. But yeah, this wasn't bad at all. Joseph King of Dreams tells the Genesis story about, well, Joseph. Just like how the Prince of Egypt tells the Exodus story of Moses. And while I wouldn't say this is as good as The Prince of Egypt, I still definitely think there is quite a bit of value here. The story about Joseph and his brothers is actually really endearing, though the songs are rather forgettable, but I remember them being enjoyable while they played. I'm honestly glad I came out of this film and learned the story, since I'd never learned it before watching this. I do have a few gripes with the film, however. Firstly, Ben Affleck as Joseph was, I don't like it. I didn't hate his voice, it just didn't fit the best in my opinion. Secondly, the story moves a little too fast for my liking. Fast-paced DreamWorks movies are certainly common, but this one in particular really would have benefited from some extra runtime in my opinion. The story just feels really overdone. And lastly, the animation. Outside of the good-looking backgrounds and the dream sequences, this movie has the worst computer animation in a DreamWorks feature. I owe Megamind 2 an apology. Don't believe me? Take a look at this. Yes, this is a real scene in the movie, clearly a consequence of the film being direct to DVD. Still, the animation that wasn't computer animated was solid. Overall though, if you're looking for a good adaptation of the Joseph story, I would recommend this. To be fair, it's the only adaptation of the story I've seen, but I really enjoyed it, so take that as you will, I guess. Kicking off the B tier, I have Abominable, which I think is a really cute family film. This is actually one of the few DreamWorks movies that got a lot better for me on rewatch. I remember watching this for the first time I think a year and a bit ago, and I thought it was quite low tier for DreamWorks. I remember liking the visuals and wanting to hug Everest, but overall I just didn't really feel much for anything else in the movie. This just came off as really forgettable in my eyes. But on my latest viewing, I actually quite liked this. I still think that the visuals are great, the adventure was more engaging than I remember, and the story with Iggy is actually really sweet. I do have a few issues with the movie still though. The plot convenience at times with Everest's powers is kind of laughable. Dr. Sarah as the villain wasn't bad, she was just very forgettable, and the climax was a tad bit rough. Abominable is still a fairly solid family film though. And who knows, maybe on rewatch I might like this film even more considering how I didn't even like it the first time. Anyway, let's move to the next film. Next up I have Over the Hedge, which is a film that I cannot stress enough loved as a kid, and on rewatch for this video, I think it held up fairly well. Hearing the songs that Ben Folds made for this movie again literally unlocked my inner 6-year-old self. I still absolutely love the characters in comedy, I'm really glad they were as funny as I remembered. Not too much against this one. The middle of the movie wasn't as engaging as I remembered, and there were some parts of the film that I just didn't really care too much for, but otherwise, in my heart, this is an absolute childhood classic. I really like it and I would highly recommend you give it a rewatch if you grew up with it like me. It's not a perfect movie, but I had a great time watching it. I can never hate this movie. Overall, very nostalgic for me. Next film. At number 29, I have Monsters vs. Aliens. Yeah, I like it. Just like Over the Hedge, I watched it a lot when I was younger, and I really liked it back then. So of course I'm going to be nostalgic for this one. However, I will admit that this movie is quite flawed. I just don't really see why this film even had a climax when all the emotional arcs for our main characters were already completed. And Galaxar as the villain definitely needed to have a big connection with the main characters. But hey, despite all that, I still really enjoyed this on rewatch. Galaxar used to terrify me, and without that climax, we wouldn't have gotten this line.
I may not have a brain, gentlemen, but I have an idea.
This movie is heavy on the comedy genre, and if you're going into this film wanting to laugh, you will get that. Bob is easily my favorite part of this movie. He makes every scene he's in funny, and I love it. In general, this entire movie is hilarious, and I was enjoying myself all the way through. One thing I am confused about though is why this is the most expensive DreamWorks feature, when the humans look like this. To be fair, a lot of the computer animation is really impressive for 2009. Overall, I like Monsters vs. Aliens. If you're looking for an animated comedy, I think this is a really good one. Watch it if you want a good laugh, or rewatch it if you grew up with it like me. Next up, I got Wallace and Gromit and the Curse of the Were-Rabbit, which is, to me, my least favorite of the Aardman DreamWorks collaborations, probably because I own Chicken Run and Flushed Away on DVD, unlike this one, which I don't. This is still a fairly solid film though. The British humour in these Aardman movies is always delightful. I loved Victor as the villain, or should I say comedic simp, and the stop motion clay is always great from Aardman. Some parts of the story are a little weak. The romance subplot wasn't as entertaining as the other stuff that was happening in the film, but I still found this to be a really entertaining movie. Again, I didn't own the DVD of this one like Chicken Run and Flushed Away, so this didn't come down as a classic in my childhood, but I still really like this one. It's still a really good time, and I would recommend it to anyone who likes stop motion. Next up on my ranking, I have Antz, DreamWorks' first animated movie. Yeah, this movie is a fever dream. This quite literally has to be the horniest DreamWorks movie besides El Dorado. There's an erotic fantasies joke in this, and it is wild for a kid's film. Honestly, this movie in general just lacks any kid appeal. Even I remember highly disliking this film when I was younger. I owned this on DVD, and I thought the animation was creepy, and I hated the war stuff. I mean, I was like 7, so it makes sense. I'm not too sure many kids would want to watch anything war related at their age. On rewatch though, I actually enjoyed this. Growing up is realizing Antz is good. The war elements were honestly great and unsettling. I loved the villain, I liked the characters, they were really funny. Like, please, DreamWorks, I would prefer you bring back more films like this. Stop making so much child-friendly stuff. Admittingly, the animation has dated quite badly, and Bala and Z's relationship isn't great, but if you want to see how unhinged early DreamWorks was, this is a good place to start. They were really different in the early days in comparison to what they make now. Anyway, next film. Next up, I have Home. That's right, I am a proud member of the Home 2015 fandom. Screw you critics, this is the only DreamWorks film that has my home country Australia in it, so you can't hate me for liking it. So yeah, I like this movie, so next film. Okay, fine, I'll give you my review. I thought Home was a good and fun family film. Owen and Tip have a very sweet relationship in my opinion, and I like the messages a lot. The baby alien starfish at the end are very cute. I do see why this film does get a lot of hate though. While I did just say that I liked the messages, I will admit that they feel occasionally forced, but I found that easy to forgive since I loved the characters that the messages were being shown through. I will admit too that the humour did have its fair share of bad moments, but I still did laugh a lot. Overall, I don't care what you say about this film. I am a proud Home defender. At number 25, I have The Croods. I think this is a really good family film. I definitely prefer the sequel, The Croods to a New Age, since that was the best animated rom-com of the 2020s. Sorry Luca, but this film stands pretty strong in my eyes. The visuals are extremely impressive. I cannot believe how amazing this world looks despite being released back in 2013. You can feel the strong visual direction from Chris Sanders and Kirk D'Amico. The cast too is incredibly stacked. Nicolas Cage, Ryan Reynolds and Emma Stone all voice the main characters. The story is where my issues come in. While I liked the third act, I found the rest of the film to be rather shaky in terms of plot. It definitely felt like most of the movie was being carried by the comedy. I found that easy to forgive though, because at least the plot was moving. I still obviously liked the comedy too, and I never felt unengaged. I just personally would have preferred more plot during the start and middle of the film. It's overall a good family movie though, and I'd recommend it. Next up, I got Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken. This one kind of grew on me, guys. So I wasn't actually able to watch this movie until like 3 months after it came out, due to the Australian theatre release date schedule. But a lot of the reactions I was hearing prior to my viewing was that it was quite disappointing for DreamWorks after Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I still came in with an open mind, and once I watched it, I agreed. This was far from being as good as a Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. But then I rewatched it, and I realised I was being way too harsh on this one. It's good family entertainment. I'll start with my cons first. I think the movie feels a little overstuffed. For some reason, this film sets up a love story, some friendship drama, and a generational war conflict, and tries to tell and balance all that in a 90-minute runtime, and it just doesn't really work, and it causes several parts of the film to move way too fast for my liking. We really only got to see the generational war story. Was that part of the story at least good? Honestly, yes, in my opinion. I feel as if this film would have been better received if it didn't follow up Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. The fantasy elements worked really well with the generational war conflict, and I really loved exploring this world. The art direction of this movie too? Brilliant. Everything from the effects to the world design to the smooth animation looks beautiful. There are some good messages and relatable themes here too. The main plot does lead to a rather predictable outcome, but it also leads to a very colourful kaiju fight at the end, so I didn't really care. Overall, it's an endearing watch with some good family messages. There are a lot of needle drops in this one, so I would recommend it if you like high school films. Anyway, next movie. Next up, I have the legendary childhood classic known as Flushed Away, the film that unfortunately ended Aardman's deal with DreamWorks. I still think it's pretty good after so many years having not rewatched it. The comedy, the characters, the cast, the villains, they all still made me laugh on rewatch. I quote so many lines from this film, it is actually concerning. The soundtrack too? Hell yes, not a single bad track. It's not a perfect movie, the story does feel a little slow at times, and the animation, while I am nostalgic for it, I can admit it's far from being as good as traditional stop motion. Some parts of the film just look really rough. But please Aardman, if you give us a sequel to this, my childhood with you guys will literally be complete. You gave us a Chicken Run sequel last year, I am literally begging you to give us a Flushed Away sequel too. Overall, Flushed Away is a childhood classic of mine. It's not perfect, but it's banging, you know. Up next, I have the third Madagascar movie, Madagascar, Europe's Most Wanted. For some stupid reason, I never liked this movie when I was younger. It might have been because it reminded me of Open Season 3, which is another third movie in a franchise that includes the main characters going to a circus. But yeah, I do not remember liking Open Season 3 whatsoever. I'm nostalgic for the first two Open Season movies, but I'm kinda scared to see how they will hold up on rewatch. Seeing memes of those movies online has made me question certain parts of my childhood. Anyway, enough about the Open Season movies. Madagascar 3 was quite good on rewatch. The circus plot was really engaging and I loved how they handled the messages. That performance scene when Firework plays is a top 10 DreamWorks moment and I will stand by that. I do in particular remember liking that scene when I was younger, that scene and Dubois. She was and still is an absolutely menacing villain. I do still have some issues with the film though, it's very predictable and I didn't like King Julian in this one. His subplot with this bear girl is really stupid. But yeah, otherwise, Madagascar 3 was quite good. Next up, I got my favourite Madagascar film, Madagascar Escape to Africa. Madagascar 2 was pretty good. I really like how we got to see so many of the character relationships from the first movie develop. I really loved the Melvin and Gloria plotline, and the main plot with Alex and his family. Generally, just all of the characters get their own little part in this film, which I really liked. It does cause the film to get a little overstuffed, but who cares, I love these characters. If there's one thing I didn't like about this, it was the villain and how he was defeated. Like, that's all it took? Really? But in conclusion, this is overall a good continuation of the first movie. Anyway, let's move to the next film. At number 20, I have the Tales of Arcadia finale, Trollhunters, Rise of the Titans. For those who don't know anything about the Tales of Arcadia, I'll quickly explain. It's a DreamWorks franchise that was created in 2016 on Netflix by the man himself, Del Toro, and it consists of 3 different shows and a feature film finale, which is this. I've watched the shows when I was younger, and I think they're really good. With the finale, we see all of the characters from the shows come together. This movie, however, probably frustrates me the most out of any DreamWorks feature. I'll explain why soon, but I'll start with my positives first. The animation is gorgeous. Despite being the only other DreamWorks movie that's been produced by DreamWorks' television pipeline, it manages to be the best looking photorealistic DreamWorks motion picture, in my opinion. It is a sight to behold, especially in comparison to the animation in the shows. Next, the story does kill off a lot of characters from the shows, which kind of hurt me to be honest, but it just really showed how terrifying and strong the villains are. Skrill and Beldrog probably terrified some younger children. The thing that really annoys me with this movie is the ending. For some stupid reason, after our characters won the battle, our protagonist Jim had to go back in time to the very first episode of the show to ensure that his buddy Toby can live since he died at the end of this movie. You're telling me that I just willingly watched 81 episodes across 3 shows and an entire movie only for it to start again at the beginning? In this timeline, Toby also becomes the Trollhunter instead of Jim. I am telling you right now, bro is not making it past Gunmar. The plot armor would literally need to show up in physical form in order for this timeline to make sense. There's an episode within the first show that tells us what would have happened if Jim was never the Trollhunter, and it did not end well. It was actually one of my favorite episodes in the franchise. The ending just feels so unlike anything Del Toro would do. In conclusion, Trollhunters Rise of the Titans is a gas movie if you remove the last 15 minutes. I'm dropping it down a tier just because of that ending. It's not canon in my eyes. Up next, I have Sinbad and the Legend of the Seven Seas. So I actually never checked this one out before starting this DreamWorks marathon. I just had never heard of it. So I came in with little to no expectations and I was surprised. I honestly wish that I had watched this sooner. If I watched this when I was like 8, this probably would have been one of my favorite films. The use of CG mixed with the 2D animation works incredibly well here and many of the scenes look incredible. Other times, sometimes the lighting can look a little muffled, but those issues were relatively minor. I really enjoyed Sinbad's arc. I've heard a few people online say that they found him unlikable, but I personally enjoyed his character a lot. Eris was a cool villain too. Not a great one, but I liked her intimidating voice and the animation with the shapeshifting. Just like Rise of the Titans though, if I could complain about one thing with this movie, it would definitely be the ending. While I liked the idea behind Sinbad proving Eris wrong, I just personally would have preferred a real climax where they fight Eris. After all, this is a movie about pirates. Otherwise though, I had a really good time with Sinbad and I'd recommend it. Up next, I have the first Puss In Boots movie. I think this is a good film, and I think it's heavily overshadowed by how good Puss In Boots The Last Wish is. I grew up with this one, so I'm obviously going to be nostalgic for it, so just keep that in mind for this segment, but I really liked Puss In Boots on rewatch. And cats, they're adorable. The music was crazy in this, and I loved Puss's backstory with Humpty. I think that was the strongest part of this film. I really enjoyed seeing what happened to their relationship. The entire climax with them was brilliant too. Though I will admit that Humpty's plan was really stupid and not well thought out at all. But his relationship with Puss, and the arc he gets, was great enough for me to really feel a sacrifice in the end. I will admit too that Kitty was much better in the sequel, but she's not bad in this. Overall, I believe that this is a really good origin story for Puss in Boots, and I think it should be talked about more. Very underrated. Next movie. Next up on my list, I have The Bad Guys. This is a delightful watch, and in my opinion, one of DreamWorks' best in recent years. I have so much fun every time I watch this one. Wolf's conflict and the tension that's put between him and his lifelong friends is actually really good. I love how it all comes down to the climax. The animation is amazing too. The heist and action scenes really show and take full advantage of it. The lighting, the smear frames, it's all very pleasing to look at. You can also feel a lot of Ocean's 11 vibes during some of the heist scenes here. All of the bad guys themselves are really likable as well. Their screen time feels pretty balanced during the heists. Shark's my personal favorite of the bunch. I love this big guy. The movie too just has a very good and simple message for kids, and it works really well. Now onto my negatives, which there aren't too many of. I don't like the villain Marmalade. I usually don't mind it when villains reveal something small to our main characters when they think that they've won, but for some stupid reason, Marmalade just reveals his entire plan to our main characters. Like, why? and he reveals it in full detail. He's not necessarily a terrible villain though, he still poses a decent threat to our characters, even if he's quite stupid. I also think that this movie should have revealed more about the meteorite before Marmalade just spills his plan. The power that it holds just felt really random in my eyes. Overall though, this is a really great family film with a really good message. I personally can't wait for the sequel next year. I think this deserves to be the next big DreamWorks franchise. At number 16, I have the finale to the How to Train Your Dragon franchise, How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. This is a great finale to the franchise in my opinion. The main characters were as great as ever, I love Toothless. My man is trying so hard to flirt and it is hilarious. Astrid and Hiccup's relationship is also brilliant in this, and I love how one of my favourite scenes from the first movie comes back in the third act here. However, this movie is by far the weakest How to Train Your Dragon movie in my opinion. Yes, the animation is gorgeous and the best in the franchise, but I just think that the new dragon designs got a bit of a downgrade in comparison to the other movies. I don't like how they made them look more adorable. I think that's the word I'm looking for, but I still think they look pretty good. I also found a lot of the other characters to be far more grating in this one. And while I like Grimmel as the villain, once someone in my comments pointed out that he looks like a Q-tip, I can no longer unsee that. Still, the ending to this movie makes me cry every time I watch it, so I'm gonna rank it this high. It's a perfect ending to the franchise, and my man John Powell delivers some more incredible music to us. It's a great finale, just not nearly as good as the previous installments though. At number 15, I have the movie you've all been waiting for me to talk about, The Wild Robot. I'll try to limit spoilers here since I'm assuming you guys haven't seen this one yet, but I was lucky enough to watch The Wild Robot early thanks to the magic of Australia, and I'm here to report, it's really good. I wouldn't say that this is S-tier DreamWorks personally, but I still had a really great time watching it. Starting with my positives, the animation is some of the best from DreamWorks. They use a similar style to what they used in Puss In Boots: The Last Wish with the paintbrush aesthetic. I noticed a lack of frame rate drops however. Some will argue for the better, others will argue for the worst. I personally thought it was for the better. The low frame rate at times in Puss In Boots: The Last Wish kind of bothered me. But yeah, The Wild Robot looks incredible. Another big positive for me was the story. It's a fairly simple story, but it's done very well. There are a lot of surprises and emotions to be found here. If you're taking your mother to watch this with you, quick warning, bring a tissue. You will need it to wipe your tears. Now onto the cast. They mostly did a great job. One detail that I loved was that the longer Roz stayed on the island, the more her voice started to change from being less robotic to more, well, wild and natural. Pedro Pascal did really good too, and I did not expect Mark Hamill to be in this. To be honest, I was sort of hoping for less dialogue like in WALL-E, but apparently Roz learning the animal language was part of the book, so I can forgive that. Still, the teaser that released for this film is what every trailer for a movie should be. Still, despite having dialogue, there were a lot of powerful moments in this that had no words at all, and they came down to some of my favourite scenes. Chris Sanders is masterful in screenwriting when it comes to no speaking. The forbidden friendship scene from How to Train Your Dragon says it all. Another big positive for me was the sound of this movie. I don't know if it was just the theater I was in, but the music went off. Definitely one of my favorite DreamWorks scores. Now onto my negatives. Don't worry, there aren't too many that I have. I wasn't really loving the first 20 minutes. It felt really in my face, and I felt like they shoved most of the jokes into this part of the film. After that though, this film really changes, and it will probably tear you apart. I can imagine this going down as many people's favorite DreamWorks movie. Overall, The Wild Robot was a great time. I would definitely recommend seeing it when it comes out. Next movie. Next up I got Rise of the Guardians. This is definitely the DreamWorks movie I watched most when I was younger. I literally remember the day my cousin showed this to me, and it instantly became one of my favorite movies. Though I was not able to sleep for several nights because of pitch black, and on rewatch I can understand myself. This movie is quite dark for a DreamWorks film. Still, I got my own copy of the movie back then, and I still love this film after all this time. I must say, I don't remember Jack Frost's character being as good as he actually is. His character is really well written and it adds a nice mystery element to the film. The scene where he finally finds out about his past was like the craziest scene I'd ever watched when I was 6. And it hurts my inner child knowing that this movie actually had a sequel planned at one point. You can look at the list of cancelled DreamWorks features, and it's on there. I would say that I want a sequel now, but now I'm scared DreamWorks might massacre it the same way they did Megamind, so please keep this as it is, DreamWorks. My only major issue with this one was some of the holiday elements. While I enjoyed that part of the film, it was just not nearly as interesting as Jack Frost's mystery. Outside of that though, I love this movie. I don't understand the hate on Pitch Black as the villain either. To be fair, he used to terrify me, but I think he's really intimidating. Overall, it's a childhood favourite of mine. Next movie. Next up I got Kung Fu Panda 2, which went surprisingly hard on rewatch. In comparison to the other Kung Fu Panda films, this one in particular feels much more darker. Like, there's literal genocide in this one. It is very tonally different from the other Kung Fu Panda movies. And for many people, I can understand why this would be their favourite Kung Fu Panda film. The action scenes are brilliant. The Gongwing City action sequence and the final fight are both breathtaking. DreamWorks knew that having both Hans Zimmer and John Powell in one room to compose for this was going to be dangerous, but they went with it anyway, and I'm all here for it. The music in these movies are brilliant. Lastly, I want to talk about Lord Shennet the villain. Yeah, he's really good. Very intimidating. I love the connection they put between him and Poe. It really made the final fight feel extremely rewarding. My issues? Not too many. I just think that the humor in this one is quite weak, but I can forgive that since this film is very dark. Great film, let's move on. So apparently this is a hot take, but I really love Shrek 4. You should have seen my reaction when I found out that this film is apparently disliked by many online. You know what? I will stand by cinema score on this one. Shrek 1, 2, and 4 are great movies. Shrek the Third, yeah, it's not bad, but it's definitely an outlier. I've read some less than average reviews on Shrek 4, and I just can't get myself to agree with any of them. Many people say that the idea of Shrek giving up his life for a day of being feared was stupid. Meanwhile, I'm just out here thinking that the message about valuing what you have was a great continuation for Shrek's character. I also really like Rumpelstiltskin as the villain and how he's written into the plot. I thought his threat was really great. I do agree on this being not nearly as funny as Shrek 1 and 2, but I still found this to be a pretty funny film. Overall, I would defend this movie. I love it. Let's move on. Wow, get ready for a massive tonal shift with this video because next up, I have the Prince of Egypt to talk about. The Prince of Egypt was a surprise alright. There is a really sad and depressing story here. Ramses was one of the best DreamWorks villains in my opinion, probably in my top 3 now. I love how we get to observe how he changes from being Moses' kind and caring brother to an evil and merciless villain obsessed with power. The plague sequence is really something. Hans Zimmer went off. Now, I would put this in S tier, but I don't think this movie's perfect. There are sadly some awfully kiddish moments in this, which I usually wouldn't mind in a DreamWorks picture, but for a movie with moments like this, it just felt really out of place and really detracted from the experience. Otherwise, this was great. I will certainly rewatch sometime. Next up, we got the greatest romantic comedy of all time, The Croods to a New Age. Yeah, what happened with this movie? I actively loved this, but I was watching this at like 1 AM in my bed, so this was also the weirdest thing ever. Grog and Phil's caveman scene says it all, man. I was actively laughing when watching this, and I'm convinced that the writers were on something, because there is no way someone writes a story and a script like this, and says, yeah, I'm gonna pitch this to a multi-billion-dollar company. Unless you were super high, you were not doing that. But I loved The Croods too, so I'm glad they did. Much like the first film, the cast does a great job here. The new characters especially are great. I love every plotline in this, and I love the climax with Eep and Guy. It was actually really sweet. The animation, however, I'm kind of mixed on. I can't tell if I like it or not. On one hand, the saturated colors and texturing look great, especially on the environments. But on the other hand, the animators just decided to make everything super rubbery, instead of taking a more photorealistic route like in the first movie. I liked the rubbery art style in Ruby, but I don't know what to think of it here. I think I like it. It was very funny, that's for sure. Overall, if you're looking for a brilliant romantic comedy, this is a great place to go. It does get overly chaotic by the end, but besides that, I loved this. At number 9, I have Kung Fu Panda 3. I think Kung Fu Panda 3 perfectly combined the incredible action from Kung Fu Panda 2 with the good humor from Kung Fu Panda 1. It all comes together really nicely and it's really well done. I remember seeing this when it first released back in 2016. The animation blew me away and it still looks so amazing today. Kai as the villain was decent, better than the Chameleon for sure, but not up there with Shen or Tai Lung, but J.K. Simmons does an amazing job. I loved the main plot with Poe and his dad. The music too, obviously incredible, it absolutely went off in the climax. This movie in my opinion has the best music out of all the Kung Fu Panda movies. Kai's theme is amazing. The ending to this movie is just perfect too. I honestly don't even think we needed a 4th movie. I have some gripes with the film however. The first 20 minutes felt awfully childish, but thankfully it really picks up after that and I just ended up really loving the rest of the movie for what it had to offer. Again, amazing animation, cool fight sequences, I had a really great time. Next movie. Next up, I got the first Kung Fu Panda movie. This is the best out of the 4 movies in my opinion. It's Kung Fu Panda, I grew up with it. It's a DreamWorks classic. Of course I love it. With a name like Kung Fu Panda, this movie should not contain so many impactful messages, epic fight sequences, and hilarious jokes. Actually, that last one kind of makes sense. So many memes have come out of this movie. All of the humor is held up beautifully. At the same time though, Kung Fu Panda still manages to have its silly moments while also having moments that are genuinely quite deep. Literally any Oogway quote has left me rethinking my life choices. I'm holding back this one from being an S tier just because this movie does take the easy way out and just do a one training montage later thing. It's a very DreamWorks thing to do, but I didn't care that much here because that training montage went insanely hard. Like, look at the lighting. Overall, it's a wonderful childhood classic. Next film. Up next, I have Chicken Run, another movie which I grew up with. I'm gonna be honest, this movie was terrifying the first time I watched it. I was like 6 and I thought this was what a horror movie was like. I don't blame myself though. The unsettling clay motion on Miss Tweedy, the heavy shadows, the low saturation, it all speaks horror movie to me. There is no way that this movie was intended to be viewed by children. This is surprisingly dark for kids and really sexual. Why did the people at Aardman make the chicken so bottom heavy? Anyway, Chicken Run is amazing. This has some heartbreaking moments. You have no idea how betrayed younger me felt when this movie revealed that Rocky lied to everyone. That scene actually broke me when I was 6, but I do remember clapping when Rocky came back at the perfect moment. That scene still goes so hard. Also, if you're wondering why Chicken Run 2 isn't in this video, it's because DreamWorks didn't have any involvement in that movie, only Aardman. I thought the sequel was pretty good though. If it was a DreamWorks film, I would put it in an A tier. I wouldn't put it over this movie though. Overall, Chicken Run is one of my favorites from DreamWorks. There's a lot of emotion and genuine surprises to be found here. Next movie. Rounding out the A tier, I have Shrek. It's a classic that I think any person can enjoy. It's arguably the most well-known and watched DreamWorks movie. Everything from the soundtrack to the humor is near perfect. The screenplay is incredibly smart and it results in such an amazing love story. What I love about Shrek the most is that out of every DreamWorks character, Shrek feels the most like a real person. His conflict, what he learns. This is a very special film from DreamWorks. I love Shrek, and if you don't love Shrek, I'm not sure if I can trust you. I'm sorry, it is very, very hard to fault Shrek. Overall, I love it, and you probably do too. I don't have to worry about having a hot take here. Anyway, I'm moving to the S tiers now. I really wanted to limit the amount of S tiers I'm giving out, and in the end, I've come down to 5 movies. Puss in Boots, The Last Wish. This barely tops Shrek for me. This is what we call a visual marvel. The colors, the environments, it feels impossible to express how much I love the visual style of this movie. At times the frame rate drops did bother me, most particularly with that one fight against Jack Horner, but otherwise this is a beautiful movie to look at. This also has to be one of the darker animated movies that have been released recently. There is a message about valuing a life in here, and I love how it's shown. Death is an amazing villain. He, for sure, traumatized some children. I remember watching this for the first time and I actually did not know what was going to happen regarding Puss and Death. I was actually starting to consider that Puss was going to be at the end of his life here. The adventure 2 is a blast and all of the characters feel very well rounded. I am a little sad of how this movie does overshadow the first Puss in Boots, but I can understand why. I do think that this movie is quite a bit better. Overall, phenomenal movie. Now my next S tier is Megamind versus the Doomed Syndicate. No, I'm just kidding. Megamind. I love this movie. I actively quote the banter scene with Megamind and Metro Man almost daily. This is a great comedy with a really amazing and mature story. I love the DreamWorks version, the characters, and just about everything here. I am still so shocked of how this movie looks so much better than the sequel despite being released 14 years ago. I also might be the only one with this take, but Titan is personally my favorite DreamWorks villain and I'm not sorry. I love how well he's written into the plot, his simp personality, and just Jonah Hill's voice in general. Speaking of which, the cast of this movie, Will Ferrell, Brad Pitt, David Cross, it just goes on. They all do a fantastic job as well. Oh, and the song choices too? Highway to Hell, Welcome to the Jungle, Crazy Train. But yeah, Megamind is one of the best from DreamWorks. I would certainly recommend it. Anyway, moving to the top 3 I have Shrek 2. Which I think is the best Shrek movie. It somehow has a stronger story than Shrek 1, the best emotional moments in the franchise, and the best soundtrack. I know I just praised Megamind for its music choices, but Shrek 2 has the best song choices in a DreamWorks feature in my opinion. In this, we got Funky Town, Accidentally in Love, Livin' a Vida Loca, and a Holding Out for a Hero cover. I mean, come on, it's banger after banger. The humor from the first Shrek is also present here. The fairy godmother is a really well developed villain too. She's written into the plot quite well. Overall, I love Shrek 2, but do I think it's the best DreamWorks sequel? Well, at number 2 I have How to Train Your Dragon, 2. I don't think the world realizes how perfect this movie is. This is a top 3 animated movie for me. At one point when I was younger, this was even my favorite. Watching this for the first time was an absolutely incredible experience for me back in 2014. The visual upgrade from the first film is incredible. The ice and snow still looks so real. I actually feel like I'm in a cold environment every time I watch this. The new dragon designs are brilliant, they fit so well with the others, and a lot better than the ones from the third movie. I cannot express how much I love the flying sequences. They are so well choreographed, it's insane. Everything from the camera shakes to the angles we get just get my heart racing. The emotion is somehow stronger than in the first movie too. How to Train Your Dragon 1 has so much emotion on its own, but this one somehow manages to have more. This scene where they burn Stoic is one of my favorite scenes in any animated movie. John Powell delivers another incredible score and it just makes me cry. How to Train Your Dragon 2 is phenomenal, but it does not top the first movie for me, since in my opinion, the best animated DreamWorks movie is How to Train Your Dragon. Not just that, but it's my favorite animated movie. And and I've seen like 210. This and Ratatouille are my bad day cures. This one is less comedy focused than most DreamWorks features, and as a result of that, it's able to tell such a mature story. It contains one of the best father-son stories I've ever seen. So many of the characters feel well rounded. The step in 3D that this pushed for DreamWorks is amazing. On top of that though, this movie has the single best score in a DreamWorks feature. Not the best songs, I do love Sticks and Stones, but Shrek 2 obviously keeps that crown. But the best score goes to this one. They get me feeling things that I didn't even know I could feel when watching a movie. Forbidden Friendship is my personal favorite in the score. It just proves that the strongest parts of certain films can be the ones with no dialogue. But the entire OST is brilliant. The fact that this didn't win Best Original Score in 2010 over The Social Network at the Oscars actually hurts my soul. But at the end of the day, awards don't matter. How to Train Your Dragon is a film about fighting about what you think is right. It's an incredible animated movie that I'd recommend to nearly everyone, including you if you haven't seen it yet. Yes, that's right, I can see you through your camera, and you haven't watched it. And that just about concludes my video, guys. Hats off to you if you watched the entire thing, despite my obnoxiously annoying voice. It's a shame knowing that DreamWorks is now going to be moving away from doing the animation completely in-house, but hey, all we can do is hope for the best. We got Shrek 5 coming, Bad Guys 2, and some other stuff to look forward to from them. What the heck is Gabby's Dollhouse? Also, quick note, this video was entirely made for fun. I have no intention to negatively alter your opinions on these films. If anything, I hope I encourage you to look back on some of your childhood favorites from DreamWorks. If you want to see more reviews from me, I have a letterbox, link in description. That being said, I hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and I'll see you next time.